Well, hello, my name is Sven van Straalen, and I'm going to talk about server-side rendering. But first I want to start with a bad joke. Who knows a web developer that likes to find bugs? In the back, just shout out. Yeah, here you go, that's a spider. Okay, so we do some crazy stuff at Capgemini, and I'm one of that crazy-minded people that do crazy stuff at Capgemini. One thing what we do, for example, is building an arcade cabinet, and this arcade cabinet is running fully on front-end JavaScript. Actually, we're using a framework, not Angular, but vue.js, but it's still fun to build. By night, I DJ. That's nothing to do with any of development, but how I get into development is one of the things, because when I was a DJ, or actually I'm a DJ, I want to have a website, and I thought I will build it myself, and I still don't have it. Yeah. So basically that. In Capgemini, we are trying to build a nice community of all developers. Everyone is welcome to join, not to work for Capgemini. You can also just join the community and play with the arcade cabinet freely. But yeah, that's that. We also do some serious stuff, and we did a small experiment, and that's server-side rendering against client-side rendering. I'm now going to show you our new bank that we have created. It's Bankular. And Bankular is built in Angular in a client-side way. Oh, this is the server-side rendered one. This is the client-side rendered one. Here we go. As you can see, our new bank is especially for kittens very nice. And we can log in. And if we log in with here we are. We have our nice account overview screen, and we even can transfer money. So let's transfer some money, 100 kitty dollars, and then transfer it to the other account, and here you go. We transferred some money. Thank you. But there are some issues with our bank, because it tries to get on Google, it wants to be on Twitter, and it's quite a low performance. Well, actually, we have quite a good connection over here, but when you have a slow connection, the site actually loads quite slowly. So the problems that we see is, well, the SEO is not working properly, the loading speed on slow connections, and actually some slow devices. They have also kind of issues with our application. But this is the HTML, this is the issue that we're actually facing with the client-side rendered application. Because when the first response from the server comes, it's HTML, it's just some JavaScript references, an icon, and that's it. So the only thing he has to render at the first start is the title, where it says Bankular. Okay, thanks. Now I know what it is. So if we look into the critical render path of the application, of Google Chrome or Firefox or whatever, first they will get the HTML. Then they will try to get the CSS if there is a CSS reference there, and then it starts to render that CSS out. But at this moment, we don't have content. If we have content, then it should look like this, then immediately your site is there. And then it will start compiling your JavaScript, and your JavaScript will eventually run. And for a client-side rendered application, it's going to look like this. So first it will get the HTML, but there is no content in there. Then it will start loading the CSS, or try to render the CSS. Then we need the JavaScript to run. And then on that moment we do some API calls, probably to get the content, right? And then we see something on our screen. So this is actually the timeline can be quite long just to get something on your screen. And how will we improve this? Server-side rendering. So let's look at what server-side rendering actually is, and especially now to Angular. So first we have our front-end framework that now runs on the server and then immediately starts render out the HTML that is needed together with the CSS. So the timeline to now show you how that works for a server-side rendered application, it will be like this. So first, it will get the API calls, but basically there is no connection to the client yet because it will do it on the server itself. Probably you have some extra backend services if you're working at big applications for for example, the banks where I work, we have like tons of API calls to make to get you the first screen. Then it will serve the HTML to the client, and then immediately it gets the CSS, and when the CSS is there, it immediately renders the page. Because there is already content on the page, because it's already server-side rendered, you already see something on your screen. But this is actually the perceived performance that you get, because the application itself is not yet usable for the client. Because it only sees the screen, there is no JavaScript, so you can hit a button, doesn't do anything. But then eventually the JavaScript kicks in, and then the website becomes like interactable. But it still can help you like making your website faster. And that's what I'm going to show you guys today. We are going to do this with Angular Universal. Who ever heard of Angular Universal? Oh, that's a lot. I can go by. Well, cool, but I'm quite lazy. I've already done it. And we are going to do it with something quite nice. And that's a schematic. You probably all heard about schematics because of the previous talk. So I don't have to explain anything there. We are using the Express engine. You can also use ASP.NET for server-side rendering. But I'm a JavaScript guy, so I'll stay just in the JavaScript world. What actually the schematic does, it will eventually change your package.json, and it will add some new commands, build SSR and serve SSR. Maybe I can actually show it to you guys. Where is it? Here we go. Yeah, this is visible, right? Let's see. Where's my package.json? Here you go. As you can see, we have some extra commands. So it's compile, server SSR. I made actually extra one to put it on AWS. And actually what I do is just get the dist folder, zip it, and then put it on Elastic Beanstalk. It's quite easy to do. If you eventually want to look in this code, that's all on GitHub. I'll share the link later. The main TS file, normally you have there our thing standing like, that's called, sorry, wrong one. The main TS file, that's will wait on bootstrapping with when Angular Universal was loaded. And the app main, the browser module there is changed that you call a function called with server transition that actually tells your application that you're now server-side rendering your application. Also, it changes the Angular JSON. This changes the output part of your client-side application, so it just changes the folder from this to browser. And then we have an extra new project that's called server. And this project actually tells the Angular CLI that there is now a server-side rendered application of your project, and with some extra files that are being created. What are those files doing then? First, we have webpack and the tsconfig. Well, webpack for bundling the stuff, and the tsconfig actually because Node.js is only working with CommonJS. Actually all your TypeScript of your server is being eventually transpiled to CommonJS files. And then we have the main server where we have that actually exports the app server module. And the app server module is quite interesting. What's happening there is that it will get your client app. So actually your client app, oh, okay. And then it will inject all the Angular dependencies, what's needed for server-side rendering. And what it actually then does is that where the client-side rendering was happening, it will be changed to the server-side version of it. And then you have the server TS, what's basically our Express server. And then we have some interesting code here. Eventually you're going to change your server because maybe you want to use Fastify or whatever. And this Express engine is quite needed. If you don't use this piece of code, it will never work, because this tells actually that it will make the output an HTML file that's readable for the client browsers. Well, let's boot it up, and also already did that. So here we have our new server-side rendered application. As you can see over here, it's server-side rendered. And we eventually again can log in. Oh, nice. And then here we are in a new way of our server-side rendered application. And the nicest thing is it exactly does the same. There is only one difference, and I'm going to show you guys that right now. So if we go to our client-side application, and if we then look at the HTML, if I'm allowed to, here we go. There you see there is no content at all. And this is the spot where server-side rendering is actually helping, because if we go to our server-side application, here we see there's a lot of content. So we're actually using Bootstrap, so we have a lot of CSS immediately injected. But as you can see, also the metadata is being added. Shall I make it a bit bigger? Well, I don't know if it's really useful to read, but it's there. And we added some metadata, and that's actually all needed for SEO engines and these kind of stuff. And here you can also see the immediately complete HTML rendered out for your client side. So then we also took it eventually to the test, and we tried out, okay, how's the speed going? So I'll run this video where you can see the differences in client-side and server-side rendering. Oh, shit. I just want to hit the play button. Here we go. Well, it's 1 second. It's something. But what I did, we used the smallest elastic beanstalk that is there. So probably if you have a beefy server, that can be faster, but I don't know for certain because I use the smallest one because that's cheaper. For the rest, yeah, I already spoiled a bit. We have here some nice differences between if you have the client-side rendered application and the server-side application. As you can see that the client-side application, you won't see anything on Twitter or WhatsApp, and with the server-side, because the metadata is already there, you get something actually there. And the funny thing is, if you go to Google, or to the Angular page, I can do it also. Let me do it over here then. AngularIO. And let's go to the docs, tutorial hero. Now we all know this is all built in Angular, and if we get that application and then put it in Twitter, should. It's not going to show me things. Well, here you can see that even the Angular with the client-side rendered application is not able to show the metadata that it's actually using. The only place where this actually works, that's Google itself, but it's quite limited what they are showing over there. But the search engine there is it knows a bit how to render the JavaScript out. The only thing is it's running on Chrome 47, and I don't know which version we are already on, but it's quite a long one. Help. Oh. I was like, what's going on here? 72. We are on version 72. So that's quite of a difference that we have there. Yeah, that's actually basically it. I'm quite fast already. Oh yeah, good to know. There are some issues with doing server-side rendering because you're on the server. You can't use the window object, the document object, and the location object. This also means if you have like node modules, for example, that are using the window object, document, or location object, then they also won't work. So that's a tricky thing to find out. Avoid using set timeout, well, duh, because it will slow down your server. And then we have like more server load. That's quite of an issue that we can have. So because first off, you normally do like, you have a file system where you use your HTML files and your JavaScript being put out. That's not really a lot of server load. And now you're actually rendering stuff on your server. And with all the calls you're getting extra, that can be heavy. But this can actually be solved by using a cloud delivery network like AWS CloudFront or Firebase from Google, and then your server-side rendered stuff can be cached. And when it's cached, they will just call the cache call instead of the server-side rendered server. Eventually, you still need JavaScript because you want to make it interactive. And yeah, that's it. So you can find the code on Bankular SSR. This is my LinkedIn and my Twitter account. Just have fun. Thank you. So much faster. Too fast.
Does anyone have a small question? Oh, hand straight up in the middle there. Excellent. Great talk, by the way. I loved it.
Thank you.
Heard some good laughs as well. You got more laughs than me, so that's
a good
that's
thing,
something.
right?
You showed us an example that was very simple. Are there any downsides when you use server-side rendering in a big project?
Oh, yes. So, so we try to build this as quickly as possible because I first had a talk for micro frontends, and so we actually swifted around because we saw there were already a lot of micro frontends talks. So we eventually found out that with server-side rendering, responsiveness is not working quite properly yet. That depends which framework you are using, but I think I'm not allowed to say Vue.js is working better there. Because the server itself can't detect what kind of device you are on. And so you have to do kind of quick twerks to get that working, especially when you're using Flexbox, then that can be a pain in the ass. But for micro frontends, for example, you can be saying like, you put, depends on the data you have, you will make it server-side rendered or not. Because you also have pre-rendering, for example. So if you have completely static data, you could say, well, this can be done build time, and then you're done and you have the static data over there. But like for a headless CMS, for example, you are able to do it server-side rendering, and then you can change it. That's basically for shops maybe interesting. And then you have really dynamic content. Well, probably then you will end up with client-side rendering in the first place again. I hope I answered your question.
So how does it work with like things like cores? Does the calls to the API have a different source IP?
Yeah. I'm going to show you the code that makes it much easier for me to explain. So what I can do is, so when you're server-side calling your API calls, it doesn't know your host because the browser itself knows which host you're on. So when you when you're going to do the server-side rendering, you have to change your services. I'm going to show you that. So it's a small trick that we have done. Now let's take the home content service. That's the easiest one. So what we've done, we put the environment over here, and that actually then build time injects what's API to call because there is no host anymore, so we put it statically in there. And for the rest, with the client-side stuff, there's the cores only. So if you eventually are client-side, you get just a normal slash and then call to your root URL that you already have.
Any last questions? Oh, there's one at the front. How nice to run to.
Yeah, just a small question. Do you actually use this technique for your clients or something, or it's still too early for that? Too slow?
Yeah, I'm not allowed to say which clients, but there are a few clients that are actually interested in it. But there we are also like really trying to shift in a way, because there we are now actually working with AngularJS, for example, and so we are doing a complete re-architecture of the front end, and we are actually looking into these kind of things, but it really depends on which part of the application what's going to use. And for me, that's now I'm thinking of like, it really is on the data part than on really just say, let's the hell with it, let's go for server-side rendering altogether. Also, Angular Universal itself, they are still working on making it nice and responsive. These kind of issues they still have. We hacked it a bit by injecting some CSS to make it responsive, but there is not yet a fully support from Angular Universal itself. It's on their backlog, that's for sure.
Okay, thank you.